He pushed him down, and there was a ladder propped up, and the other guy got on
Oh,
top
that's
rope.
the Hardys with the Mercury and
Yeah,
accident.
yeah.
Yeah.
Let me tell you something right now. That was hard to watch. When
Yeah,
he
it
jumped
was.
off and landed, and it went back up and hit, I have a hard time believing they wanted it to work like that because
No, Mercury broke
that,
his nose.
that was
Bad.
that was unbelievable.
Oh my
I
God.
watched it the other day. That was hard to watch. I was like, and that guy had to be in so much pain.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh! I was like, what in the world were they doing on that? Now I'll be honest. I'll be very honest with you. And like I said, hey, mad respect to those guys. That to me, I don't want to see that. I
Yeah.
would. That's not to me. I don't want to see stuff like that. Like I said, the Hardys don't get. Those guys are ultra talented. But when it comes to like seeing people get like a ladder popped in their face like that, I don't want to see that. Like I said, I think that that's not something that I like enjoy. And quite honestly, as talented as those guys are, I get nervous watching that stuff.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
when I see, and like I said, no disrespect, man, because like I said, those guys are braver men than I am. But to get up on top of something like that, I guess I'm at the point now in my life I realize how short life is and how dangerous things are. I don't want to watch that. I'm afraid for those guys' lives.
Right. Yeah.
And when you start getting 15 feet up in the air and jumping off stuff, and man, just the slightest little slip and you break your neck and never walk again. Like I said, it's risky enough what they're doing, already. Just having a regular wrestling match, doing body slams and having somebody jump off the top rope on top of you is one thing. But man, when you start getting on top of ladders and stuff like that, it scares me to death because I'm just afraid something's gonna happen to them. I remember back during the scaffold matches back when I was a kid.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Man, I'll tell you that as entertaining as it was, I was so afraid that those guys were gonna fall off, and if they'd have fallen off that thing while standing up there, you could have died. Jim Cornette when he fell, I think he tore his ACL. Big Bubba was supposed to catch him, and this is when this guy, I guess it was probably 1986, 87 was at Starrcade. I think they did a scaffold match. And Big Bubba, who ended up being the big boss man in WWE or WWF at the time, he was underneath and supposed to catch Cornette, and I guess he didn't catch him.
Oh, wow.
Cornette fell. If you can Google it and watch it on YouTube. I mean, that was a long way to fall. His knee buckled, man. I mean, it buckled. But those kind of things, like I said, no disrespect. It's just I just for me. Watching The Undertaker and Shawn Michaels wrestle last night, like I said, just watching that match or watching a Steamboat and Flair match, I love that kind of stuff. When people are stacking 12 tables up in the air and jumping through them, that to me is not something that I thoroughly enjoy watching. Number one is I'm afraid somebody's gonna, like I said, one of those table snaps the wrong way, and one of those cords goes up inside your stomach or something like that. Next thing you've been impaled by metal. I don't really enjoy that kind of stuff. Like the ECW days. I mean, those guys some of the stuff they did was just, I couldn't even, I can't put words to it.
Yeah.
Some, jumping off some of those things, man, I don't know how in the world some of those guys not break their necks. But that kind of stuff was tough to watch for me. The barbed wire stuff, seeing people jump into barbed wire and rip their skin completely off and stuff. That to me, not my thing. Like I said, and like I said, those guys are tough as nails to do that stuff.
Oh yeah.
But that, I guess I'm of the. The barbed wire match, the barbed wire match I ever watched, the only one I ever really watched. Is it New Jack who does those so much? New Jack, I guess he does those. That guy,
he does a lot of that stuff.
Yeah.
That guy's got to be the toughest person on the face of the earth. I don't know how he does that.
Yeah,
I just think he's crazy at this point.
I mean,
he's crazy.
that's insane. I mean, that guy. must be just, I don't get it. Because I mean, your flesh is literally getting ripped off your body at that point. But I think that the more power to him. Like I said, yeah, I'm not gonna mess with him. but
yeah, I want to put a disclaimer. He's crazy, but please don't come hunt me down, please.
Yeah, I'm not gonna go after him. But like I said, I'm not gonna sit there and watch that because quite honestly, I just don't want to watch somebody get hurt that bad. But I will say that the only barbed wire match I really watched was when Dusty Rhodes and Tully Blanchard fought a barbed wire match, much different than the ones you see some of the ones today. But they had one at the Great American Bash. You know, like I said, it was different. You know, it was a little more. It was a little different. How they put it on, but in general, I would rather see just a good, solid wrestling match. I love to see guys who can work. You know, I like back in the day, man, when you would watch. I don't know if you remember Brad Armstrong. Yeah. Brad Armstrong, Tim Horner. Yeah. Brad's passed away, unfortunately. But you know, Tim Horner was his partner. I'm friends with Tim on Facebook. He's a neat guy. Those guys, they get in there and just work. Rock and Roll Express, they can work. You know, get in there and like where you're actually seeing guys who can wrestle. You know, where there's punching and stuff, but there's also, you know, like I said, there's arm drags or snap mares. You know, you're getting down there and you're working somebody over. The Minnesota Wrecking Crew, Ole and Arn Anderson back, you know, before they even with the Four Horsemen, just get in there and just working hard, you know, sweating and getting in there and really putting together a match. That to me, I think it was so cool. Like I said, that's why I loved, you know, back in the day watching those matches, because it's, you know, it was just a hardcore, not meaning hardcore like you're hitting people with sledgehammers, but hardcore, you know, just really solid wrestling match that you could sit there and watch with a kid, you know. And I think that to me was neat to see. And if you look at some of these guys, you know, like I said, that some of these guys were just so talented in what they were doing. I mean, a lot of the guys back then, they came from a wrestling background, you know. They wrestled in high school, they wrestled in college, so they knew they knew that side of the business, you know, too. Now Jimmy Garvin, I think Jimmy started wrestling, he was like 9 years old, you know. 9 years old he was wrestling, and then I mean he just kept on wrestling and eventually got a job as a wrestler. I mean, the guy, he wrestled, like I said, I know his family well. They're super people, and he was a stud. The guy, he knew how to wrestle, as well as, you know, giving brainbusters and all that kind of stuff like that. But he knew how to wrestle, how to put together a match. Flair, you know, same thing with him. You could tell he knew how to wrestle, and I think that's what we need to see. But I think that, you know, when you look back at those 80s days, the biggest difference really, you know, I think that, well, there's probably several different reasons, but I think the biggest thing back then was the fact that the business was not exposed yet, you know. And I think that
big time,
that was it, you know. And so today it's like I said, everything changes. I mean, that's just part of life, you know. And doesn't mean it's not as good. It's just different than it used to be. But I think that if you grew up in that time, you know, that's kind of what you remember as your favorite, you know.
Absolutely, absolutely.
But I think that what was neat then was the fact that, you know, these different territories, guys, to me this is fascinating. So, you know, we all know that they wrestled 365 days a year, you know, twice on Saturday, once on Sunday. You know, we heard that.
Which, they had the ridiculous schedule, Yeah,
they're scheduled. But I think the thing that was so neat, like I said, for me, is the fact that you would have, because we didn't have social media then, and we relied on Pro Wrestling Illustrated, which Bill Apter, who I love Bill Apter. I've actually, he's gotten to know me through my music here in the last several years, and neat guy. But I think that, you know, back then I got all my information from watching TV and then reading Pro Wrestling Illustrated, you know, and who's ranked number one, you know. Oh my gosh, how in the world they have the WWE guy or WWF guy ahead of the NWA guy. I mean, yeah, it was just neat stuff to see. You know, who is Ric Flair gonna be number one this week? You know, over Hulk Hogan but I think what was really cool about the territories is that you didn't know what was going on. In other words, you could have a guy working down in Florida Championship Wrestling, and he could be a good guy there, be a bad guy working up in Virginia. Like they, you know, the promoters back then, these guys, they would trade guys. You know, like, hey, we're going to send some guys down there. You send some. Like, you know, Lex Luger was in Florida Championship Wrestling before he came up to the Crockett's.
Yeah.
They would trade. They would trade back. You know, they would send people up back. They learn so they could learn how to work. And so I think it was really funny how, you know, back then you could have somebody go lose the belt somewhere in a dark match, and hell, by the time they were on TV next week, they'd already won it back. But they might have to do that just to make that event bigger, or make the next town bigger, or whatever.
It happened a lot during the tape days for wrestling.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's like, it's just crazy how that works. But see, you could get away with it because nobody would know, right? Who would know?
Right.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I think even Ricky Morton said that he won the belt one time for Flair, went back and said, I don't want it. You know, it was a dark match. I guess maybe they were gonna give it to him or whatever. He didn't want it. You know, he wanted to stick with the tag team type stuff. You know, him and Flair had a huge run together for a while there, singles competition. But I think he was saying that it's not what he wanted to do. So you know, he's like, no, I'm good. But I think that, you know, back then, like I said, you could have, you know, lose and win, and by the time, you know, you watch TV again, you know, you're like, oh, hold up, how did he get the belt? You know,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's, I think that was so neat how that worked. But I always thought it was interesting. Have one guy who was wrestling out of one territory, but then he would show up in the other territory, and he would be either a different character, or maybe not a different character. Maybe he was just, you know, maybe he was a heel in one place and he was a baby face in another. And I always thought that was so interesting. But like I said, the liberty they had to do things back then was so much different than now, because today you couldn't get it. Well, say this, you could get away with it because people know the business is exposed now. But
it wouldn't be the same level.
It wouldn't be the same level. But like back then, you know, if he had social media, oh my gosh, people were like, oh my gosh, I saw Ric Flair and Dusty Rhodes eating a steak together last night. You know, I took a picture of it on Instagram. Imagine how screwed up it would have been back then. I mean, the business would have been, and there's no way in the world it could ever, with the way things are now, there's no way in the world they could have ever kept anything sacred back then with social media. And so, like I said, obviously we all know social media, and I obviously use it for my business and everything else for that matter, but and to share pictures of your kids or family. But I will say, for the wrestling business, I wish that it didn't exist, so we could go back.
Yeah. I have to agree with that. It gave away a lot of things. It's hard to have the, you know, what you're talking about. Basically, it'd be difficult to keep it, you know, hush, and, you know, of course you got, you know, people sharing things and, you know, whatnot. So I understand what you mean by that. Yeah.
It's still great. Still a great product. I still love it. It's great.
Oh yeah.
You mentioned two people that have two children that are high ranked currently in their respective companies. Do you think Cody Rhodes and Charlotte Flair will overtake their parents? And what they accomplished?
You know, I think Charlotte Flair.
You think Charlotte Flair will?
Well, I think Charlotte Flair. I'm gonna speak to her first. Being a lady, I'll speak to her first. I'll say her. You know, I listened to her dad talk about her the other day, and he was saying she'll be the GOAT. You know, and I think that I don't know how long she'll continue to wrestle. So, man, and like I said, for me, it's when people say, like, who's better, Jordan or LeBron, like kind of stuff. I think everybody, you have to look at different times of when people were around. You know, I mean, it's hard to say. You know, it's like